Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to bring to you Lady Jaina Proudmoore. Let me set the scene for you on this one. For our RP reasons, we are attacking the Kultiran fleet. We are on the big boat, but there's not many Alliance there. We're there, though, and who should come? Streaking out of the skies. Oh my god, is it a bird, is it a plane? No, it's Jaina Proudmoore. She's coming, and she's fierce, and she's ready to kick our asses into next week. Good god, it's so cool. And thankfully, Blizzard have learned from some fights, maybe in ICC, that this rather long introductory RP is not happening every time you wipe. You don't have to watch this every single time. You don't have to wait for Jaina to come swooping in. Each time you want to pull this fight, she'll just be waiting for you. This fight is extremely clever. Extremely clever. So we are on an Alliance ship, and we're going to start off by fighting Jaina directly. Now, the first thing and the biggest thing that a lot of people are super hype about this is Jaina does respond to what you're doing to her. Most noticeably, if you pop Bloodlust to try and burn through a phase, or try to deal with some mechanics, or even try to play catch-up, she will ice block, and she will prevent you from DPSing her, which is very clever because this is something I have been asking for. And if you've been watching this channel for a little while, you'll know that I was suggesting that there should be modifiers to Bloodlust, and certainly in Mythic Plus and the Azerite armor, in order to allow us to utilize this in a different way instead of this one standard universal buff. Now we're using Bloodlust not as a DPS burn. We're not doing that to try and bypass a phase or to make or break certain checkpoints in the fight. Now we're using it to actually nullify Jaina for a small period of time while we deal with other things. This is how we're going to be utilizing Bloodlust in this fight, or Heroism, whichever it might be. And we were very confused at the start because we were popping Bloodlust so we could see all the phases, as you generally do in testing. And she just sat there in an ice block, and we didn't realize it was because of what we were doing. We have some theories about other things that Jaina might be doing. She bloodlusts herself and bloodlusts her friends at certain points. You can't spell steal it. Sorry, mages. I must point out here as well, apologies to my fire mage brethren here. The lag on the PTR makes playing fire horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. So lots of errors from me on this. Going forward, though, what is happening on the boat? Well, Jaina's got us trapped, essentially. That's the thing. We've walked into the snare, and the Kultiran fleet is going to be attacking our ship because there's no Alliance left on it. It's just Jaina, and she will bring in a couple of Marines, a couple of ads that fixate people and try and kill them, but they're very weak. They're just extra targets to be killed. Essentially, the Kultirans are, in fact, just trying to sink the ship and drown us along with it so Jaina can teleport away quite safely. Her job is to keep us on the boat. What's going on here, then? Well, I hope this is going to teach generations of people what port and starboard are, because they have left it as that the Kultiran fleet is attacking from the port, attacking from the starboard, and we're going to use the ship's own weaponry, their own ballistas, in order to drive away the attacking boats. So you can already see the ships come in. We're going to then use the ballistas to shoot arrows and fire flaming arrows at the ships in order to set them on fire and drive them away. And while those ships are there, they're going to be bombing our ship. They're going to be dropping big fire puddles everywhere. Some of these land under players, some of them are completely random, so you can't really control what's going on there. Similarly, they're going to drop fire barrels to get your toll to go training in. So you're going to need some people to go and pick up these barrels, drag them to the end of the ship, and throw the barrels off. All the while, and it does seem to happen, is that the Marines that she summons occasionally do fixate the people carrying the barrels and try and knock them off and push them off the ship. And obviously, if you go into the water, you are dead. So there's all this going on. At the same time, Jaina, of course, is using her Frost and Arcane powers, which means she's going to be debuffing people with Avalanche, making them do massive amounts of Frost AoE, which you can use to put out the fires. You have to be careful, though, because the fires do set fire to the ship's ballistas that you're using to attack the enemy Kultiran ships. If your ballistas get set on fire, you've definitely got to prioritize the people that get chosen with Avalanche to put out those fires, because you cannot use the ballistas while they're burning. And if the enemy ships are attacking you and you have less ballistas to shoot them away with, that means the ship's going to get covered in way, way, way more fire and overwhelm you pretty quickly. So all this is happening at the same time. When Jaina reaches full energy, though, she has a choice of things to do. She has a various amount of things to do. She can do massive AoE knockback, or she can do a huge freezing effect, which will freeze the entire raid, which means you can counter that by standing in fire. So if you jump into the fire, very similar to Karazhan, if you think about the Maiden in there, where you actually wanted to debuff yourself with that very nasty Sanctify Holy damage, that will clear the repentance. It's a similar idea. You get the whole raid into the fire. That will stop the freezing effect, which slows you down and does huge amounts of damage to you. It's worth taking the fire damage instead of the frost damage and being frozen. If you don't do this, though, this is the cool thing, and this is an ongoing theme throughout the fight. If you don't do this, if you don't get rid of this chilling touch effect, which means you've been hit by something that Jaina does, she's going to turn you into an ice block, and you are just screwed. It's 30 seconds, does ticking damage to you, and you can be DPS'd out of it. That is possible, certainly on Heroic, which is what this is. You can save people out of it, but ideally you want to be getting set on fire in certain times, monitoring these stacks, and this will continue throughout the fight. If you get too many, you get hit by too many of Jaina's mechanics, you're going to have to burn yourself in order to try and clear it away. You can immunity it, I want to point out. So all this is going on at the same time. You're not quite sure at what point Jaina's going to do what, which makes the fight far more interesting, because instead of saying, get ready to do this, get ready to do that, it's a case of, let's see what she does and then adapt to it and modify it and work around it. The fire is constantly spreading, so it makes the areas go from big to small. You've got avalanches running around, huge amounts of movement, huge amounts of swapping. But due to the nature of the fight, and this is something I really love when Blizzard nails this, this feels a little bit like Kael'thas to me. There are so many different elements and things that need doing, from barrels, ballistas, to adds, to dealing with the ice blocks, to dealing with avalanches, to dealing with fire, that you can't say raid switch here, raid switch here. What you're going to do is actually assign various little groups of people to deal with different things. So everybody else can focus on other important things. So you might say, you two deal with ballistas, you two are dealing with barrels, you two are dealing with this, you two are dealing with that. And you have this whole raid team effort. And that's what I love. Team effort makes everything worthwhile. Once we get to like 60% though, Jaina's going to be a little bit pissed that she's not wiped us out and it's not working, and she's going to crash us into an iceberg, essentially. She's going to crash us into an iceberg, and we are getting off the boat, folks. We are getting off the boat. She's going to try and trap us once again. This is about Jaina trying to wipe us all out as best as she can. So in this phase, she's going to teleport to somewhere on this iceberg, this frozen wasteland. Very much reminded me of the last boss of The Witcher 3, where she's going to then summon a frost storm, which is going to reduce your visibility to practically zero for the entire raid. And this is a bit like Illidan's phase, where Illidan became lost in the darkness and you had to find Illidan in order to get the buff so you could deal with the adds. It's similar to that. But while this is going on, you have a very limited field of vision. Everybody has to move as a unit, right? You want to move together through this, and all while this is going on, there's going to be blizzards, there's going to be frozen orbs, there's going to be all kinds of stuff swirling around in this frozen storm. And once again, you get hit by too many of these debuffs, you stack this chilling touch debuff up too much, then you're going to be turned into an ice block. And the game here is find Jaina. If you can find her, you can get it done. Hunter's very good at this, obviously being able to mark her, ping her on the map, do all kinds of things. So you can do stuff like, and you have to interrupt her. That's what you got to do. You got to find her and got to interrupt her, is have the rogues and the mages blink off as fast as possible, and the rogues sprint away and try and find her as quickly as possible and lock her down so that the storm stops and visibility is restored. And then you can deal with the people who've been ice blocked and get everybody ready for the next phase of this fight. The next phase of this fight has, once again, lots of individual responsibility, lots of things going on. She's going to be putting ice waves right across the room, which are well telegraphed. You can pre-plan around them very nicely. And she's also going to be casting her arcane spells now. Massive arcane lasers are going to start shooting out of her. Very well telegraphed again, just about paying attention to what Jaina is doing in order to try and counter this. And this is also a time when you can bloodlust should things be getting tricky, just to stop her doing some of her mechanics while you get your head in the game, clear people from ice blocks, do all that kind of stuff, depending on how well you've dealt with the fight so far. All the time, though, she is constantly stacking this chilling touch debuff on you, regardless if you get hit or not. It's so cold where we're fighting that she's constantly freezing you down. And how you deal with this is dealing with her new arcane mechanics. Again, she's got the powerful laser. She also has a huge AoE, which means one player has to run the hell away and get it away from the raid. But also going to mix that with two other arcane abilities, which you can drop on these fire barrels that are on the floor. Now, these fire barrels are frozen solid. They take no damage until you drop these arcane bombs on them, which then makes them vulnerable. And you only have, I believe it's 3 of these barrels to deal with this entire phase. So what's going to happen is you're going to drop one of these bombs on top of the barrels. That makes it vulnerable to DPS. You're going to be DPSing it down. That's going to cause the barrel to explode. And that means you need people to run into the explosion. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it will burn you. Again, it burns you, clears your chilling touch debuff. That means you're not going to turn into an ice block. And that way you can carry on with the fight. And you're going to have to stagger these throughout the fight, making sure you DPSing her down constantly. Otherwise, you very quickly run out of barrels. Because I said there's only 3 of them, and this stuff stacks up relatively quickly. Now, this is as far as we got. There are more phases to this fight. They are mentioned in the dungeon journal, where it gets worse and worse as time goes on. There'll be no more barrels, so people are going to get stacked up. A little concern, a very minor concern here, is entirely possible to stagger who is getting the chilling touch ice block, and therefore you might be able to cheese your way out of dealing with the barrels by having, say, 5 members of the raid at a time turned into ice blocks, everybody stacked on top of Jaina and constantly AoEing and shooting her down. And also a risk of a Zool situation where you bring sub-rogues and they are able to stack ice block players around them and do tremendous amounts of damage to Jaina by AoEing and nuking her down, which is something we see with Zool Mythic. So that is an entire possibility. But just look at the scope of this fight. Absolutely incredible. So fun from start to finish. Was just looking around, taking it all in. Very careful interrupts of Jaina. She's fully interruptible, which locks her down for a while, really helps your tanks out. Trying to cycle that along with everything else going on. And again, each thing individually, not a big deal, but this time not really dealing with overlaps. Overlaps have always been a classic thing for like the last 3 years, and they get very tiresome. This time it's more a case of just managing all the time, because these things don't stop. It's not about terrible overlaps. So far, it may be in the last phase, couldn't tell you, but right now, what an absolutely awesome fight. Conclusion to this one, and I don't usually do a conclusion, but this needs one. This is what I expect from World of Warcraft. This is what I expect from an end game raid boss. Epic on all levels. Beautiful, gorgeous, all the scale, traversing. It feels wonderful to be a part of the whole thing, not just the fight mechanically, but the actual environment and all the elements that are going on that all make logical sense. They're all interesting, fun, lots of responsibility for different players, doing different actions. Everything I could want seems to be in this fight so far, and I truly hope that in the Mythic difficulty they don't screw it up in some way or mess around with it in some way to try and alter it and magnify it and mutilate it in some way, because right now this fight is looking tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. I couldn't have asked for anything better. Already compared by many players to be the next big Ragnaros. So often we're presented with very basic circular rooms, something square, something obvious, some ways of spreading out, doing this, doing that, where this is a team effort from start to finish in order to overcome this challenge, where we're assigning like 2 or 3 people to deal with different elements of the fight, and doing that across the whole raid, 2 or 3 doing this, 2 or 3 doing that, 2 or 3 doing this, and then all moving together as a one big unit in order to overcome this fight. I can't tell you how happy I am to see Battle for Dazar'alor looking as good as it looks. It started weak. The first boss is very weak, and after that, the creativity, and that's what's been lacking in BFA for me so far, is creativity. Taking something at its very base value, be it a Warfront, be it Azerite armor, be it whatever, and then saying, what can we do with this? This is just a circular ball of clay. How can we turn it into something? How do we make it work wonderfully? And Uldir is good enough. It's nice. It's environmentally very beautiful. Mechanically, it's okay. It's okay. It's decent enough for a first raid. But then you compare it to what we've seen, and we've now seen every single boss in Battle for Dazar'alor. it's not even made by the same people. It's unbelievable to me that this is made by the same company. It makes no sense, and I'm so goddamn happy, and I hope you guys are too. Thank you so much for watching. As always, remember, we're a blacklisted channel. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can, or you can join us on Twitch or something like that, where we're streaming all kinds of stuff. But get ready for Battle to Dazzle, because it's looking very cool, and one of the better ways of getting people back into the game.